Hi, it's Katrina. Artificial intelligence can now decode 5,000-year-old text in an instant. But is it smart enough to tackle some of history's greatest undeciphered mysteries? Let's find out. Cracking 5,000-year-old codes. Beneath layers of earth and centuries of dust, humanity's earliest voices have waited. Carved into clay tablets, chiseled into stone, inked in faded scripts, ancient messages from vanished worlds lie silent, untranslated, and largely forgotten. But what if I told you the key to unlocking those voices isn't a brilliant linguist with a magnifying glass, but a soulless machine? While science fiction dreams of space travel, Dyson spheres, and Martian colonies are still little more than a fantasy, there is one piece of sci-fi tech you might have access to sooner than expected. And that piece of tech is the Universal Translator, a staple of the Star Trek universe. Sure, you've got Google Translate on your phone that can translate conversations in real time, but what about a language that no one speaks anymore? AI models can now read dead languages, translating them quicker than your daily dose of Duolingo, and some have not been spoken in over 5,000 years. Here's an awesome example of this technology in action. At MIT, researchers Yuan Cao, Jiaming Luo, and Regina Barzilay took on the problem of lost languages. They used a strategy called minimum cost flow, teaching the machine to learn efficiently, like a linguist with a tiny notebook. They tested their system on languages already cracked by humans, such as Linear B from the Mycenaean civilization and Ugaritic, an ancient relative of Hebrew. The results were astounding. Their AI translated Linear B with over 67% accuracy, an astonishing feat given how sparse the input was. There aren't exactly any Linear B dictionaries on the market. Still, there's one big fish that scientists couldn't fry, and that was Linear A. Linear A is Linear B's unruly cousin that refuses to cooperate. It was the language of the Minoan civilization and has mocked archaeologists for over a century. It remains undeciphered, but the AI's success elsewhere suggests it might only be a matter of time before it can crack the case. While MIT tackled Bronze Age scripts, another team set its sights on a much older challenge: Akkadian. This was the language of Sargon the Great, the Akkadian Empire, and the mighty cities of Mesopotamia around 2300 BC. It's one of the earliest languages that humans have a massive record of, and also one of the hardest to read. Why is it so difficult, you ask? Because Akkadian was written using cuneiform, a wedge-shaped script pressed into wet clay tablets using the reed styluses. It wasn't streamlined and it wasn't simple. A single symbol might mean multiple things depending on the context, which means that translating Akkadian is a two-step process. First, transliteration, and then translation. Imagine sounding out each syllable before even knowing what the sentence means. The process can be incredibly frustrating for researchers. Even worse is that there are hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of Akkadian texts sitting untranslated in museums around the world. At the current rate, humans won't translate these ancient documents for thousands of years. So, good thing we have AI to do it for us. A team of archaeologists and computer scientists created a neural machine translation model, like the one behind Google Translate, and trained it using the open, richly annotated cuneiform corpus. It learned to translate both transliterations and the original cuneiform symbols directly, and then they tested it. The AI scored 37.47 when translating transliterations into English, and 36.52 when going straight from Unicode cuneiform glyphs. That's still less than half correct, but very solid for what it's doing. With a bit of time, the percentage will surely become much higher. The biggest surprise was that the AI also picked up on genre distinctions. It knew the difference between a royal decree and a literary poem, which was a kind of nuance it hadn't been explicitly trained for. In other words, the machine wasn't just translating, it was understanding context. Kind of like teaching your cat to play chess and realizing it knows how to castle. Should we be scared right now? Assuming AI becomes so sophisticated it can decode languages on its own, what's the next step? Will AI become so advanced it can decipher our thoughts? Something tells me that maybe, just maybe, we're in a little bit of danger. The scroll that couldn't be read. Even fire couldn't destroy this secret. It looked like nothing more than a charred lump of old leather, the kind of thing you'd scrape off the bottom of a fire pit and throw in the trash. But in 1970, archaeologists working in the ruins of an ancient synagogue in Israel had the good sense to be suspicious of this crispy relic. Its cylindrical shape hinted at something more. And it was. What they had found was a 2,000-year-old scroll, blackened and fragile, that no one dared to touch. Even the gentlest brush risked turning it into dust. For decades, the so-called Ein Gedi scroll sat in storage, its words sealed away, too delicate to unwrap and too precious to destroy. Scholars could only wonder, what message had it carried through the flames of time? And then science happened. Enter the team from the University of Kentucky, led by computer scientist William Seals. They stared down this ancient mystery with a modern toolkit that no Bronze Age scribe could have imagined. X-rays, algorithms, and code. With a technique that sounds like something out of sci-fi but is rooted in raw computational brilliance, they pulled off what once seemed impossible. They called it virtual unwrapping. And yes, I'm going to tell you how it worked, step by step. First, X-ray scanning. Using microcomputed tomography, the scroll was scanned in high-res 3D. Then it was time to map the layers. Inside the charred mass, layers of the scroll were folded, smashed, and warped like a crushed Toho cake. The team's custom algorithm guessed where one layer ended and another began, tweaking it until it fit just right. And with that, the scroll started to give up its original shape. The third step was finding the ink. And I think this might be my favorite part because it's pretty wild. By analyzing the density of each point, the software could see where metal-rich ink was absorbed into the paper. It rendered these spots as bright points, thereby illuminating the letters written centuries ago, unseen by human eyes in eons. The last step was flattening the image. The illuminated text still curved and spiraled around a virtual cylinder. So the team virtually flattened the surface, turning the 3D data into 2D images. Hebrew letters stood out in luminous columns, their strokes cracked and interrupted by damage, but there, unmistakably, was the Book of Leviticus. Boom! A biblical bombshell for the ages. The Ein Gedi scroll is now the oldest known Old Testament scroll found inside a synagogue ark, dating to the 3rd or 4th century. It's a survivor of both fire and time, but it's also now the first religious manuscript ever read without being opened, a digital miracle in a field once ruled by tweezers and prayers. Even better is that the entire process is transparent. Every pixel in the final flattened image can be traced back through the algorithmic pipeline, so skeptical scholars can review the source data themselves. It's the academic equivalent of PIX or it didn't happen. And because the project was funded by the National Science Foundation, the team has pledged to release the full software to the public, allowing researchers anywhere to run their own digital autopsies on fragile scrolls and manuscripts. If you have a charred scroll from 2,000 years ago sitting in a closet at home, this is good news for you. Though of course this applies to literally nobody except history professors with fedoras. Still, it's very exciting science. Now let's see what AI is doing to crack the Indus Valley script, the most mysterious undeciphered language in the whole dang world. But first, a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to DNA Hatsi and Charlie Keene for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with me today. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Can AI finally decipher the uncrackable code? A $1 million reward hangs in the balance. A prize for solving one of humanity's oldest and most profound puzzles. In the cities of the Indus Valley civilization, a society that flourished over 4,000 years ago in what is now India and Pakistan, scribes carved symbols into tiny stone seals. The symbols were, nobody knows, trade deals, names, maybe just religious texts. Scientists had the seals, but no one, not even the most brilliant scientists in the modern world, have been able to decipher the meaning of their symbols. It's one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in human history. Believe me when I say that not a single solitary word of the Indus Valley script has ever been decoded. And now AI is taking a crack at it. Can AI beat this primordial language of the ancients? Rajesh P.N. Rao, a computer scientist at the University of Washington, has spent years studying the Indus script using AI. Along with Nisha Yadav from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Rao has applied machine learning to analyze patterns in the symbols. They have found statistical structures that resemble grammatical rules, a possible sign that this script is indeed a written language. In fact, Rao once made headlines by claiming the case was closed, a bold declaration reported by the BBC. But most experts weren't ready to hang up their magnifying glasses just yet. Identifying patterns is one thing. Understanding what they mean is an entirely different challenge. And right now, no one knows what the script means. But boy, are scientists trying, and they have a pretty tempting motive to be the first ones to do it. Remember how I mentioned that big reward? In a public challenge, Chief Minister M.K. Stalin announced a $1 million reward for anyone who can definitively crack the Indus script. Why the huge cash reward? Because many believe the script has deep connections to early Dravidian languages, making it a possible ancestral link to Tamil. Unlocking the Indus Valley script could rewrite the early history of South Asia and shine new light on one of the world's oldest literate cultures. Even with AI, this code isn't cracking easily. AI's role so far has been like a code-savvy detective analyzing fingerprints. Machine learning algorithms are trained to spot recurring patterns, sequences that appear too structured to be random. Rao and Yadav's work showed that some of these patterns are statistically similar to spoken languages, especially those that use agglutinative grammar, like Tamil. They've used computational models to map symbol frequencies, order, and repetition. But the main question is still miles away from being answered. Scientists are no closer to understanding what the symbols actually say. Even with the most sophisticated AI programs, this language is being ridiculously stubborn. Only time will tell if AI can really decode ancient languages on its own. But you know what AI has already accomplished? Oh, just rewriting the history of the Dead Sea Scrolls. No biggie. Enoch the AI Prophet. A single rock thrown by a Bedouin shepherd in 1947 didn't just land in a cave in the Judean desert. It landed on a historical fault line. That impact cracked open one of the greatest archaeological finds of all time, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Over the next few years, thousands of fragments from over 1,000 manuscripts emerged from 11 caves near Khurbat, Qumran, whispering secrets from more than 2 millennia ago. This was one of the most epic finds in human history, and it's just gotten even more epic thanks to AI. As scholars pieced together these ink-on-parchment time capsules, one mystery lingered. How old are they really? Many were dated through educated guesswork, based on handwriting styles and some sparse radiocarbon tests done in the 1990s. The tests suggested the scrolls were written somewhere between the 3rd century BC and the 2nd century AD. Now, thanks to artificial intelligence, that timeline just got a serious reboot, and it's all because of a digital prophet named Enoch. Enoch was the biblical figure who allegedly wrote the Book of Enoch, detailing what life was like during the brief era in which Earth was ruled by the Nephilim, right before God sent the flood to wipe everyone out. Enoch's son was Methuselah, the guy who lived for nearly 1,000 years. This digital prophet is not the same Enoch. This one is a custom-built AI created by a research team led by Mladen Popovic. He is the dean of the Faculty of Religion, Culture, and Society at the University of Groningen. Instead of receiving divine visions from God, this Enoch gets high-resolution images of crumbling manuscripts, and what it does with them is nothing short of miraculous. Combining modern carbon-14 dating and AI handwriting analysis, the team trained Enoch on 30 fragments with confirmed dates. Then, like a game of paleographic Jeopardy, they fed the AI more samples without giving away the answers. Enoch correctly estimated the dates 85% of the time. Then came the real shock, as Enoch repeatedly dated the scrolls at over 100 years older than previously thought. The implications are massive. One manuscript containing verses from the Book of Daniel, previously pegged to the 2nd century BC, now appears to date much closer to the 3rd century BC. Another scroll from Ecclesiastes, originally believed to be from around 175 BC, has been bumped back to 300 BC, all thanks to Enoch's analysis. It's really exciting, said Mladen Popovich, because it opens up new possibilities to think about how these texts were written and how they move to readers outside of their original author's social circles. In other words, the Dead Sea Scrolls may not have been written in the shadows of a crumbling Jewish kingdom, but rather during its golden age. This whole thing is reshaping how scholars think about early Judaism, biblical evolution, and even the roots of Christianity. Exciting, right? But what's next for our digital friend Enoch? So far, Enoch has analyzed 135 undated scroll fragments, providing realistic date estimates for 79% of them. But this is just the beginning. Popovich believes future versions of Enoch could expand beyond Hebrew texts to other ancient scripts like Syriac, Arabic, Greek, or Latin. As the program evolves, it's opening up new chapters of human history long trapped behind brittle pages and fading ink. For a field where every crumb of parchment is priceless, AI tools are a game changer. But what happens when you pit AI against the world's most baffling document? Can AI conquer the legendary Voynich Manuscript? The Voynich Manuscript versus AI. If there were a global museum of unsolvable human nonsense, the Voynich Manuscript would be sitting in a glass case at the center of it. The Voynich Manuscript is the heavyweight champion of historical WTF. It's roughly 600 years old. It's written in a language that no one has ever seen before or since, and it's filled with inexplicable drawings, plants that don't exist, zodiac charts from someone's fever dream, and a section of naked women lounging in fluid-filled pools connected by weird plumbing. This is the weirdest ancient book in the world. And although there have been headlines everywhere in the last little while about it being decoded by AI, that's not true, not even close. The buzz began with a paper by Greg Kondrak, a computer science professor, and Bradley Hauer, a grad student. Their study, charmingly titled Decoding Anagram Texts Written in an Unknown Language and Script, was first published in 2016 and presented at a conference. Then journalists got wind of it and ran screaming into the headlines, "AI solves the Voynich Manuscript." Except it didn't. What Kondrak and Hauer really did was use a form of statistical analysis to determine the possible source language of the ciphered text. They fed in samples of the Voynich script and ran it through their language fingerprinting algorithm, which they trained on 380 languages using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the reference text. Phew, are you guys with me? In fewer words, they wanted to know the source language of the manuscript, and their program said it's probably Hebrew. Then, as a final flourish, Kondrak and Hauer took a few choice words, made a few spelling corrections, and fed them into Google Translate. You know how it is. Anyone who's ever used Google Translate for an extended period of time knows how reliable that can be. The result was a vaguely grammatical sentence reading, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people." That's it. That's the whole translation that took the world by storm. It means nothing and is utter gibberish. Lisa Davis, executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, pointed out that every few years, someone claims to have cracked the manuscript. People have said it's everything from early Latin to Aztec and even Klingon. Nick Pelling, who's been studying the Voynich manuscript longer than most algorithms have existed, gave the whole thing a near zero chance of being legit. He's written books, given talks, made documentaries, and still can't read the thing. When he learned about the so-called translation, he laughed and shrugged it off. AI hasn't beaten the Voynich manuscript yet, but it is trying, and maybe one day it will work. But for now, the manuscript is still the weirdest literary mystery in the world. 4,000-year-old language decoded. There is a language so ancient, it makes Latin look like a trendy dialect from last summer's TikTok craze. It was called Linear Elamite, and it hasn't been spoken in 4,000 years. Now, a band of scholars claims they've cracked it open, but the scientific community is skeptical. Let me start at the beginning. In 1903, during a dusty excavation in Susa, Iran, a team of French archaeologists unearthed tablets etched with mysterious symbols. These weren't your standard cuneiform characters. this was something new, something sassier, something known as Linear Elamite. Fast forward to today, the language is extinct, dead, and cold as a brass doorknob. So imagine everyone's surprise when a research squad led by archaeologist Francois Dessay from the University of Tehran said they deciphered nearly all of Linear Elamite, not just a few scraps or one random sentence like the guys who claim they translated the Voynich Manuscript. Francois said he and his team deciphered almost the whole thing. How did they do it? Plot twist. It wasn't AI. In this case, scientists used good old-fashioned brain power. They analyzed 8 inscriptions on silver beakers and cross-referenced them with known cuneiform texts. Think of it like using subtitles from one movie to figure out what's happening in another movie. Here's an example of one of the lines they deciphered, which does seem like something that would be on an ancient clay tablet. Just when Dessay's team thought they'd earned their decoder rings, the plot thickened. Professor Jacob Dahl from Oxford raised eyebrows at the team's use of inscriptions from Konar Sandal. Their translated texts came from a place where many of the artifacts have been accused of being fake. 7 of the 8 inscriptions came from the private stash of Kushan Mabubian, the son of a 1920s archaeologist. The 8th relic was seized by Norwegian police from businessman Martin Schoyen, who was suspected of getting it via the antiquities black market. This is pretty exciting stuff. Because of the dubious nature of the artifacts, no one is believing the team's inscriptions. And this is where AI can come in seriously handy. Humans can't always be trusted. They lie, skirt around the truth, and just straight up make things up. AI, while not always reliable, at least doesn't lie on purpose. Not yet, anyway. Can AI crack alien languages? One day, humanity might meet aliens. Not the little green dudes in flying saucers with an addiction to crop circles, but real, complex, intelligent beings. They might even look exactly like us. And if that day ever comes, what the heck are we supposed to say to them? Let's be honest. Take me to your leader just won't cut it. Not if their idea of a leader is a hyper-intelligent cloud of gas or a sentient moss colony. Humans have no idea what the cultural differences will be like between us and beings from another world. But we might have one tool that can actually help us: artificial intelligence. The same technology people use to generate cat memes and make weird videos of famous people eating spaghetti might help us understand aliens. If you've seen the 2016 film Arrival, you probably remember those beautiful, freaky, coffee stain-like symbols the aliens use to communicate. In the movie, a human linguist deciphers the alien language using context, patience, and a PhD in clever movie scripting. In real life, humans would probably fail spectacularly. No one could even read hieroglyphs until they found the cheat sheet known as the Rosetta Stone. In real life, AI would be translating the aliens' weird symbols for us. AI is already working toward being just that smart. Deep in research labs, scientists have been cooking up a way to let AI models talk to each other, and the results have been sort of terrifying. Scientists call it emergent communication, and it basically works like this. 2 AIs are given a task. One might need to guide the other across a grid, kind of like a robot twister, but with less awkward touching. But there's a catch. Scientists do not give the AI models any preloaded vocabulary. They have to figure out how to communicate on their own. No English, no emojis, just 2 AI entities forced into learning how to speak to one another. Much like 2 kids inventing their own weird sibling code, these AIs begin to develop sounds, patterns, and meanings. They essentially create their own language. And once AIs start talking to each other, scientists have no idea what they're saying. It's like eavesdropping on dolphins. Researchers have to reverse engineer the language bit by bit and word by word. And this is exactly how humans will probably speak with aliens. We'll send in an AI to communicate on our behalf and then try to reverse engineer what the AI learns. Not a bad system, huh? Now go ahead and subscribe before you forget. Deciphering the Kushan script. In the jagged cliffs of the Almosi Gorge in Tajikistan, where wind whispers through ancient rock and time barely moves, a secret lay carved in stone. It stared back at archaeologists for nearly 70 years, silent, stubborn, and indecipherable. A ghost script of a lost empire, like nature's own dead language written in rock. Now, after decades of mystery and failed attempts, a team of researchers finally decoded 60% of the elusive Kushan script, the writing system of a once mighty nomadic empire. A chance conversation in a museum sparked the breakthrough, a seemingly small event that would ultimately illuminate the Kushan Empire. This once mighty nomadic power had a well-known history, but its language remained a profound enigma. If you don't know the Kushan Empire of Central Asia, let me give you some background details. This mighty kingdom peaked between 200 BC and 700 AD. They ruled vast swaths of modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and northern India. These guys were warlords on horses who helped spread Buddhism into East Asia and built empires that would make Caesar jealous. While scientists do know a lot about their history, their script remains a mystery. First discovered in the 1950s, it taunted scholars like a riddle wrapped in an enigma duct taped to a brick wall. Short inscriptions were found on rocks, bowls, cave walls, all of it teasers of a language that no one could understand. Until a fateful day at the German Mining Museum, where Svenja Bonnman, a linguist from the University of Cologne, was nerding out over a replica of the Isic inscription. She teamed up with 2 other researchers to untangle the Kushan script. It took them 2 years, but they did it. And they didn't even use AI. But they did use some other kind of sophisticated technology. The big breakthrough came when they found trilingual inscriptions in Tajikistan's Almosi Gorge, written in Kushan, Bactrian, and Ancient Greek. By aligning phrases between the known Bactrian and unknown Kushan, the team could begin assigning phonetic values to the mysterious characters. The big break came when they identified the royal title of Vema Taktu, a Kushan king known as the King of Kings. His name appeared in the known Bactrian text, and matching that up let scientists crack open a whole series of Kushan characters. Throughout the whole journey, Bonnman was adamant that they did not use AI to decipher the script. She went as far as saying AI will probably never have a particular thought for the first time. Algorithms do not think, they just execute code. Wow, why don't you tell us how you really feel? Just kidding. The team didn't use AI, but they did use image editing tools to clean up inscriptions, which really is just a different form of AI. Without the computers cleaning inscriptions to make them legible, none of this would have been possible. Do you think scientists should embrace AI for tasks like this? Or is Bonnman right, and AI will never be able to think on its own to decode truly lost languages? How scientists are using AI to talk to animals. How would you like to know what your cat is thinking? Or would you like to know what your dog wants when it barks at you? Thanks to AI, humans might one day soon be able to talk to animals. Forget ancient scripts. I want to talk to dolphins for real. Don't think this is possible? In a dark beehive, a robot just told a bee where to find lunch, and the bee listened. With tiny sensors, voice recognition software, and some pretty nosy algorithms, scientists are now tuning into the conversations of animals and even talking back. From eavesdropping on bats bickering to teaching robot bees how to dance, humanity is entering a strange era of interspecies communication, and AI is holding the microphone. Researchers are planting tiny portable microphones all over the globe, on whales, on turtles, in bat caves, in beehives, in the Arctic, on mountain peaks. These little recorders gather 24/7 audio data from these remote places. And with great data comes great responsibility. By using natural language processing algorithms, like the kind that power your favorite chatbot, scientists are now spotting patterns in non-human communication, which is a fancy way of saying that scientists are getting closer to understanding how animals talk. One of the places they've chosen to start is with bats, specifically Egyptian fruit bats. Researchers like Yossi Yovel in Tel Aviv strapped recorders to a couple dozen of these nocturnal chatterboxes and recorded over 15,000 bat words. Using AI trained in voice recognition, they found that bats don't just squeak at random. They argue over food, talk differently to males and females, use unique vocal signatures, and alter their speech patterns when talking to babies. Bats use their own version of baby voice. Bat moms lower their pitch to talk to their young, triggering adorable ultrasonic bat babbling. Even the bees are talking. A Berlin-based researcher named Tim Landgraf cracked the code on their dance moves. He figured out that honeybees communicate through the waggle dance, which is how one bee tells the others where to find nectar. Landgraf's team used computer vision and deep learning to decode the moves, catalog the signals, and then build a robot bee to send messages back into the hive. RoboBee, after many awkward prototypes, finally nailed the dance. It told real bees where to find a nectar stash that no bee had visited before, and they actually went. Imagine a Roomba that could direct your dog to a hidden stash of bacon. That's what scientists are doing with bees. So, are we humans on the brink of being able to speak to animals? Karen Backer, a professor at the University of British Columbia, thinks so, and not in a woo-woo talk to your houseplant kind of way. She argues that AI bioacoustics is going to allow humans, for the first time in history, to be able to ask animals questions. And the crazy, mind-blowing part is that the animals might be able to answer, and we might be able to understand. Look, scientists already know that bats have names, whales have their own unique dialects, and elephants have distinct morning calls. It's a scientific fact that animals communicate with one another, be it a dance or a squawk. It's only a matter of time before humans can understand what they're saying. And when that day comes, it will be thanks to AI. And it will also be quite the change for planet Earth. We might not like what animals have to say. I mean, humans have been pretty cruel to them. Will humans use this new power to control animal behavior? Or will we use it for good, like to help protect bees from pesticides with flying robots that can communicate with the buzzers? Will we finally learn that cows have their own religion and culture? Humans are no longer the only species on Earth with something to say, or the only ones who can listen. The age of interspecies communication isn't coming someday. It's knocking on the hive door right now. The animals are talking, and for the first time, we're starting to understand. Once this technology becomes mainstream, going to the zoo is going to be one wild ride. Are you in?
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Babel Text. The Babel Text is an ancient astronomical text that's between 5,300 to 5,600 years old. It was discovered by Dr. Derek Cunningham in Lingjiatan, China. The Lingjiatan culture thrived here roughly 5,000 years ago, prospering around the same time Stonehenge was being built, thousands of miles away in England. This culture in China was also busy building astronomical observatories and constructing intricate stone circles. Unfortunately, most of these structures have long since been destroyed and are now lost. Archaeologists have found a lot of treasure from the Lingjiatan culture, but one artifact that really intrigued scientists was an engraved geometric plaque showing the ancient Chinese map of heaven and earth. The drawing consists of geometric lines radiating out from an 8-pointed star, and each line has a corresponding number beside it. According to Derek Cunningham, it's the numbers and lines that make up the Babel text. Cunningham says when deciphered properly, we can see how the Lingjiatan created one of the very first maps of the inner solar system. The geometric plaque isn't just a random arrangement of symbols and numbers, it's a star map showing various celestial bodies and their distance from one another. This discovery is shocking because the Lingjiatan were very real ancient astronomers, long before we ever thought possible. These people looked to the sky 5,000 years ago and were able to make rudimentary measurements between cosmic bodies. This proves that our ancient ancestors were far more intelligent than we give them credit for. The Ebers Papyrus. The Ebers Papyrus is an ancient medical document that was written around 1550 BC in Egypt. Once this document was found and deciphered, it changed the way we viewed ancient Egyptian medicine. Researchers have called it the most important medical papyrus ever discovered. The document discusses everything from how to treat crocodile bites to what contraception works best. It deals with ailments such as arthritis, burns, toenail pain, and intestinal disease. It miraculously describes the circulatory system with shocking accuracy, proving ancient Egyptians understood the finer details of how the heart worked. They even knew about blood vessels and psychotherapy. What's even more amazing is that the papyrus contains a brief section on how to cure mental illnesses like depression. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly who made this amazing document. It was first purchased by a collector of antiquities named George Evers from the city of Luxor in the 1870s. However, it was later gifted to the University of Leipzig in Germany, and to this day, it remains in the library. In total, there are 110 pages of unbelievably accurate medical information. This document suggests the Egyptians had more knowledge of the human body than many scientists in the Middle Ages, which wouldn't come for another 3,000 years. The Book of Witchcraft. There is a terrifying Book of Doom currently housed at the Library of Congress. It's called The Discovery of Witchcraft, published in 1584 to the outrage and shock of King James I. The book on witchcraft was written by Reginald Scott, with one of the only remaining originals being an edition from 1651. This was one of the first books published on witchcraft in English, which was a big deal 4 centuries ago. Most grimoires and books on magic came from the Middle East or non-English speaking places in Europe. For an English person to write and publish a book on magic was something unheard of at the time, and it really bothered those in charge. But even though Reginald's book was written in English, most of the source material came from various books on the occult from across the globe. He put together everything he knew to create a fully functional book on divination, sorcery, dark knowledge, and everything else you would expect to find in a grimoire. It was almost like an encyclopedia dedicated to witchcraft information. One of the most interesting aspects of the book was the way Reginald portrayed practitioners of witchcraft. He claimed that witches weren't evil beings who ate frogs and sacrificed children. Instead, he described them as resourceful women who practiced folk healing and sleight of hand. Reginald tried to blend science and magic in his book to dispel nasty rumors about women and sorcerers while also being informative. Sadly, the book only led to more outrage in the religious community and more anger directed at women suspected of messing around with the dark arts. Soon after the book was published, witch hysteria spread across Europe like the plague. The Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is an ancient religious text that could change history if it's ever accepted by the church. Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah, the same Noah who built the ark when God flooded the planet. His book contains information on what the world was like during the antediluvian times, the period on Earth before the biblical flood. It explains in great detail why angels turned from heaven and committed themselves to lives of sin. The Book of Enoch effectively sets up the events that come after the world is flooded and before the reign of the Messiah. However, to this day, this book is not considered canonical scripture by just about any religious group. Those from Jewish and Christian faiths don't believe anything written in the Book of Enoch. This is kind of strange because the book was written around 300 BC. We know this because fragments of the Book of Enoch were discovered within the Dead Sea Scrolls in Israel. The very authors of the Bible had knowledge of this ancient book, and yet at some point in early Christianity, those in charge decided the book didn't deserve to be official canon. This was likely because of the strange topics discussed in the book. It goes into serious detail about the angelic watchers who came down from heaven and created a breed of abominations with human women. There are also other parts of the book that explain astronomy, as well as Enoch's trip to heaven guided by the angel Uriel. For whatever reason, the Book of Enoch was considered too outrageous for the church, and they likely thought people wouldn't believe in it. Either that, or its message felt too convoluted to pass on to the masses. Supernatural Samurai. A group of supernatural samurai may really have been wandering across Japan 500 years ago. A newly translated text known as the 12 Rules of the Sword has revealed the secret of a long-lost swordsman's school. This institution supposedly taught a technique which could be viewed as otherworldly. The text dates back to the 17th century, although the knowledge found within it was supposedly passed down from a samurai many years earlier in the 1500s. This mysterious samurai, known only as Itosai, allegedly fought and won 33 sword duels. No easy feat in ancient Japan. The legendary samurai then supposedly perished at around 90 years old after passing on his lessons orally to his students. It would be another couple hundred years before his descendants would record his lessons in the 12 Rules of the Sword. The text describes plenty of ways to beat an enemy physically. It goes into great detail about the most important moves and strategies for samurai swordsmen to use, but it also contains 2 magical prayers used to enhance a samurai's mind and spirit. Eric Shahan, a Japanese translator who specializes in ancient texts, is responsible for translating the ancient samurai secrets. Eric says that the samurai were encouraged to draw Sanskrit characters on their palms, including one character representing a demon. Then they would slap their palms together, quickly mutter one of the magical prayers, and rotate their hands to activate the magic. This supposedly allowed the samurai to look at their opponent with their spirit instead of their eyes, giving them supernatural focus and strength. Would you want to join a secret samurai school? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. The Sworn Book of Honorius. The Sworn Book of Honorius is one of the oldest living medieval grimoires found anywhere in the world. A grimoire is a book of magic, anything which gives the reader instructions on how to cast spells or how to create magical objects like amulets. It's also not uncommon for these books to show someone how to summon supernatural deities like demons or angels. Grimoires were a big deal in medieval times, as alchemy blended with witchcraft and necromancy, birthing a period in time when just about everything seemed possible through one medium or another. The Sworn Book of Honorius really captured the essence of magic in the Middle Ages. It was likely written at the beginning of the 13th century, although nobody's entirely sure. The book was already popular in 1347, and in 1456, Bavarian physician Johann Hartleb mentioned the book as being used in necromancy, also known as black magic. People in the Middle Ages truly believed necromancers walked among them, and that these people could use black magic to communicate with those beyond the grave. They also thought this dark magic could be used to summon spirits, or even resurrect the dead. The author of the book is believed to be Honorius of Thebes, someone who may or may not have even been real. Honorius supposedly created the Theban alphabet, which was used as a substitution for the Latin alphabet by medieval occultists. However, there is no real proof that he ever lived, and he was spoken of as more of a mythical character than anything. The 93 chapters of his grimoire, if he truly did write it, contain one of the largest collections of forbidden knowledge of the ancient world. The Dispilio Tablet. The mysterious Dispilio Tablet was discovered hidden inside an ancient Neolithic settlement on an artificial island in Macedonia. Researchers from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki found the treasure in 1993. It was carved by people living in the lakeshore settlement about 8,000 years ago. The tablet is so important because it bears an inscription that dates back to a time prior to 5000 BC, making it one of the oldest undeciphered texts in the world. The existence of the tablet alone changes history for one big reason. Up until its discovery, scientists assumed the very first writing system was developed between 4000 and 3000 BC in ancient Sumer. However, the wooden tablet was radiocarbon dated to 5260 BC. This proves beyond any doubt that an ancient group of Europeans living in what would become Macedonia came up with a writing system long before the Sumerians. They created a complex system of lines and shapes to communicate with one another. Unfortunately, nobody knows what the writing on the tablet says. However, Professor Hormuziadis, who was involved in the original discovery, thinks the writing was used to represent the counting of possessions. Rohan Codex. The Rohan Codex was discovered collecting dust at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in 1838. The text is an enigma because nobody has ever been able to decipher the language it's written in, and no author has ever been identified. People have tried their best to decipher the mysterious text for decades, but unfortunately, nobody has ever succeeded. This manuscript contains 450 pages of illustrations and what appears to be gibberish. There's all kinds of bizarre pictures in the book, depicting epic battles, angels, and other Christian themes. The only thing anyone truly knows about the Codex is that the paper it's written on comes from 16th century Italy. Based on this, it's believed that the Rohan Codex was created during that same time, although it hardly helps to solve the mystery. Researchers don't know if the text is supposed to go from left to right or right to left. However, many scholars still consider the book to be legitimate. Some even say that its text could change history if ever decoded, while others believe it's nothing but a hoax. But if the book is a hoax, it's an extremely elaborate one. The first ever appearance of the Rohan Codex was in 1743, when it was discovered in a catalog from the library. If this ancient text is just a joke, it's been going on for almost 300 years. Unwrapped Dead Sea Scroll. Researchers recently found a new way to virtually unwrap ancient scrolls. Instead of physically unrolling old scrolls that could crumble into fragments with the slightest touch, experts can now digitally scan them and unfurl them virtually on a computer. They recently did this with the En-Gedi Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls that was discovered in Israel in the 1970s. The text contains part of the Book of Leviticus, but was damaged by a fire 1,400 years ago. Before this technology, scientists could never unfurl the scroll because if they did, it would disintegrate. However, researchers at the University of Kentucky went about reading the scroll a different way. They scanned it, figured out what the document said without opening it, and read the text for the first time in a millennia. This is a big step forward for science. It was the very first time experts virtually unrolled and studied a damaged scroll, and the implications are huge. Although the scroll only holds the beginning of the Book of Leviticus, the method can be applied to other, more mysterious texts. In the coming years, researchers will hopefully be able to see what's written on other damaged Dead Sea Scrolls, potentially revealing shocking truths that could change history forever. The apocryphal texts. There are over 300 Christian apocryphal texts in existence, according to Tony Burke from the York University in Toronto. Tony wrote an entire book on apocryphal texts, which are Christian writings not found in the canonical Bible. Some of these stories are considered strange, while others are absolutely insane. One of these apocryphal texts describes the tale of a wizard battle that took place during the construction of one of the earliest churches. Another story tells of a border guard who defied orders and saved Jesus instead of crucifying him. These two stories alone have the potential to change history, which is why none of the Apocrypha can be found in any modern Bible. The church closed the official canon to keep their religious scripture accurate, and that's the way it's been for hundreds of years. However, 2,000 years ago, people had access and read many of these ancient writings. For 400 years, Christians had debates over which texts spoke the truth of Jesus and which writings represented true historical events. It was around the year 400 AD when the church finally decided which stories were accurate enough to include in the official biblical canon. One of the most recently translated apocryphal texts was written in Coptic, an ancient Egyptian language. It was created about 1,500 years ago and was translated by Paul Dilly, a professor of religious studies. The text describes an event in which the Virgin Mary comes to Bishop Basil in a dream. She tells him about some pillars covered in demonic images that were constructed during the time of the giants. When the bishop goes to remove the pillars, he gets into a spell battle with a group of magic-wielding wizards. If this particular text is to be believed, ancient days were filled with very real warlocks. Thanks for watching! Which of these ancient texts do you think is the most important? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe! See you next time! Bye!